Yeah. So this is session. So this is a session on anger. We'll be angry in just shortly. No, we have to meditate on anger actually, as with any afflictive emotion. The well, first we discuss it. I mean, generally, well, anyway, I'll talk about later. Um, well, generally in Buddhism, whatever topic you're studying, there's this threefold process of first like learning. You hear explanations about something, and then you read or hear explanation or yeah, just like that, and then you need to think about it for yourself. You think about what's being said and understand it kind of in your own way, and use examples from your own life and related to other things you've learned about before, and try to contemplate. It's called the contemplation. So you think about whatever you're learning. And that's kind of a deeper level of internalizing it. From reading or hearing explanation is just very coming from someone else. And then you think about it in your own way and try to generate your own understanding. Um, and then in the third step, you meditate on what you've kind of, the understanding you've arrived at. You meditate on it. Means you bring it to mind. You try to change your outlook or your attitude accordingly, and you try to internalize it and make it more a part of who you are as a person. You familiarize or habituate yourself to seeing and acting in accordance with that new understanding. So that's meditation. So there's hearing, contemplation, meditation, threefold process. So like this morning, meditating on anger, we say meditate on anger, but first we have to first learn something about it. So I'll explain. That's my job. Explain stuff about anger. But then when we actually meditate on it, actually the first step is to contemplate. But we do that, sitting in meditation posture and focusing our mind inwards. But at that time, when we do contemplation, to, you know, it's just like if I sit here and explain to you, what chocolate cake, how to make a chocolate cake and what it tastes like and how nice it is, that's one thing. But to actually, you know, get a deeper understanding, you have to taste cake, right? So same with anger, I can explain about, things about anger, which I will. But then to actually check, take that understanding we get from an explanation and then relate it to our own experience, we actually have to taste the anger a bit. So you think of a situation, which we'll do later, where you became angry at someone, and kind of hold that, experience. You have to feel that experience for real, but then, with enough space in your mind that you also can think objectively about that anger and how it arose, how it affects your mind, how it functions, um, yeah, all the deficits, mainly all the drawbacks, and then how do maybe, and then we try to imagine, well, how to deal with that situation differently in the future. So when I said like we're doing a session on anger, we'll get angry shortly. That's what I meant. Actually, we will try to recall an instance where we were angry. Gotten angry in the past. Um, yeah. So this is fourth, the fourth session in this little course over 5 weeks. We did the first session on basic meditation technique, basically how to meditate. And then the session after that, it was on the mind, the nature of the mind, and different, and the nature of the mind, different aspects of the mind, what our mind is. And then remember, the definition of the mind is that which is clear in knowing. Right? Um, yeah. And then the last week we did a session on attachment, the nature of attachment, drawbacks of attachment, and then we just briefly at the end had time to work with some of the antidotes to attachment. Yeah. So this week on anger, and then next week on compassion. I believe next week is the last session. So as with every session, then we'll generate a. So there's mainly five. So this is what I introduced in the first session of this course is generally when we do a meditation session, basically there's five main steps where first you get comfortable in your posture, in where you're sitting to meditate, whether it's in a chair or on a cushion. Yeah, so you can begin to do that now. And then you spend some time generating focused awareness, focusing your mind by doing some placement meditation, focusing your attention on your breath, or you can focus on the nature of the mind, the clear knowing nature of the mind, or on another object if you already do some practice like that. So we'll spend a couple minutes doing that, and then there's generate a positive motivation. Then the main body of the session, which in this case is more like Dharma talk, and then um, some meditation, and then dedicate at the end, which we'll do at the end of the session. Okay. So, yeah. So now that you're comfortable in your seat, I hope, then let's spend a couple minutes just focusing our attention either again on your breath, but focus on the breath, or focus on, yeah, the clear knowing nature of your mind. But whatever you take as the object of focus, just try to maintain an unbroken continuity of awareness of that object without your mind being distracted to think about something else. And especially, gross distraction or coarse distraction is when you start thinking about or paying attention to something else so strongly that you lose awareness of the object of what meditation. So then that continuity of awareness or stream of awareness is broken. So then it's important to continually maintain sort of a it's like meta awareness, introspection. It's like with a corner of our mind, say 20, 30% of our mind, being aware of what we're doing, like in our meditation. So it's the job of that corner of the mind, which is, introspective, to notice as soon as possible when we become distracted, and then let go of the object of distraction and bring our awareness back to the object of meditation. So try to focus your attention like that for a couple minutes. And then, so then before, when we generate a motivation, we usually visualize ourselves, visualize oneself surrounded by all sentient beings. So I'll just describe that briefly. I don't think I did in a previous session. So we begin by visualizing imagining our parents of this life or our main, caretakers, seated to our left and to our right. So with the female, all the women, the female, our mothers, grandmothers, aunts, and so forth, we imagine seated at our left and behind us. So beginning with our mother of this life, or our main female caregiver, imagine seated at your left, and then others, family, female family and friends. Imagine them all, to your left and behind you. So just briefly bring to mind and imagine they're seated there together with you meditating. And then on your right, imagine all your male family and friends. So beginning with your father or your main male caregiver, um, the person's, that most selflessly cared for you, supported you in this life, who's a male. At your right, and then your grandfathers, uncles, and male friends and family, partner, children, siblings. Imagine seated at your right and behind you. And then imagine those whom you're most prone to become angry with, seated in front of you, facing towards you. So imagine them, I don't know, seated 3, 4, 5 meters distant in front of you, a little lower down, and facing towards you. So those whom you're most prone to become, you tend to dislike, tend to try to avoid. Um, so the reason we imagine them in front is because to remind us to put special effort into practicing patience, forgiveness, and generating virtuous attitudes towards them. Um, yeah. And then imagine all the other sentient beings who we don't have a special affection for or special aversion towards. We tend to have a neutral attitude towards. So all the other human beings, and then animals, um, yeah, and then hungry ghosts, hell beings, gods, demigods. Can imagine all in human form, seated all around us, as vast as space. Mm. So then generating a special motivation for this session, positive motivation. So the reason for visualizing all sentient beings around is because, in fact, our lives are um, intimately interconnected with those of countless others, beginning with our parents and siblings, family members, and then also those with whom we have conflicts and disagreement, and then countless other strangers, right? So this visualization represents the reality of the interconnectedness of our lives with others. So it's important in terms of our motivation to remember, not only our own hopes and aspirations and desires, especially in this case, like we begin with ourselves. What do asking ourselves, what do I want to achieve by participating in this session on anger? But then also extend that consideration to others. So, and try to generate the, you know, virtuous aspiration, that by participating in the session on anger, I can not only, reduce my own anger, but also become a resource for others, to help others also to reduce their own anger and generate the opposites to anger, patience, forgiveness, and loving kindness. Love, wishing for the welfare of oneself, and love, wishing for the welfare of others. And then eventually may that lead to become a cause for myself and all other sentient beings, from my mother and father to my strangers to even those whom I tend to dislike. For all of us to become reach the highest state of our fullest positive potential of full enlightenment. Anyway, take a minute and shape your positive motivation in your own way. So then, if you like, you can generate the mind of refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha. And yeah, I'll recite the name mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha as a way of invoking his blessing for whatever we do in this session. So if you like, if you know that mantra and you like, you can join. Ayata Om Maha So Ayata Om Maha So Ayata Om Maha So. Okay. So for the main part of this session. So that mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha, Tayata. Tayata means one thus gone. It's just like an epithet of an enlightened being. It means they've gone to the farthest degree of perfection of positive qualities and abandoning faults. Tayata Om. Om is a syllable invoking the blessings of the body, speech, and mind of all the Buddhas. It's common to both Hinduism and Buddhism. It's considered a very sacred syllable, Om. Tayata Om. Muni Muni Mahamuni Soha. Yeah. Muni means it's like a sage, um, a rishi, a muni, an enlightened being. Tayata Om Muni Muni Mahamuni So. But it also has a connotation, if I'm not mistaken, of like control, one who's controlled their mind, subdued their mind. Because a sage or a highly realized being is someone who's gained control over their mind. So one way to interpret that mantra is that it means Muni Muni, control, control, Maha Muni, great. Maha means great, great control. Muni Muni Maha Muni Soha. Soha means so be it. So yeah, one way to interpret the mantra is that it contains the five paths, um, from the path of accumulation up to the path of no more learning. But in one way, it means it's like a prayer that may I have control over my mind, a perfect control, such that become fully enlightened. But thinking about anger, Anger is one of the afflictive emotions that, well, it's the most easily identifiable of all the afflictive emotions because it disturbs the mind so much. And it's one that when it arises in our mind, it's easy to see how we don't have control. Now, anger, if it gets carried away and really becomes, blown up, you really like, that's why we, even in court, when people are, charged with a crime, one one way people try to reduce the weight of the sentence they get is to claim temporary insanity. No, but one form of temporary insanity is being completely carried away with anger. Like if you murdered someone, but you say at that time I was in a complete rage of anger, then that can be taken into consideration to reduce the sentence versus cold-blooded murder, where you coldly, calculatedly you decide to murder someone in a very kind of more sane state of mind. So even in our court system, like someone being the mind being overcome with anger is considered kind of being not is being out of control, and we can see in our own experience it's uh, you know it's um, yeah, I mean, we can also be kind of crazy with attachment or crazy with jealousy or, mind overcome with anxiety or fear, or worry. I mean, all of the afflictive emotions, their nature, again, as I mentioned last week, is that when they arise in the mind, they disturb the peace of the mind. When the peace of the mind is disturbed, then we have less control. Um, yeah, it's similar to, the mind. One analogy for the mind, I think I mentioned in the 2 sessions ago, is like a body of water. So when the mind is calm, um, then just like a body of water, it becomes very still, and the surface is not so disturbed by waves, and so it becomes the surface of the water becomes very reflective and clear. Also, the sediment in the water, settles down. The water becomes more translucent, more, yeah, clear, transparent. And then the surface of the water becomes very, very still and like glassy, and then becomes very like luminous and reflective. It reflects all the light and the images and the colors and the colors of the sky, or the clouds, or the trees that are on the edge of the water. Whereas then when wind comes up, it disturbs, or the strong currents or wind or other things disturbing the water becomes agitated in the surface. It's no longer reflective and it becomes choppy and it's harder to move through it. And it becomes, full of like sand or sediment, and it's no longer so transparent anymore. So it's a good analogy for our mind. When our mind is very calm and at peace, it's not agitated and disturbed. We feel more relaxed. Physically, we also feel more relaxed, and we are more relaxed. And then also the mind becomes more clear, and that we can see things more clearly. We know things more accurately. We can think more. We have more skill at being able to think about things in a useful way, in a constructive way. So the nature of afflictive emotions, though, they're like the wind, that disturbs the surface of the water, or like the currents, or things that disturb the mind. So the nature of afflictive emotions is that when they arise in our mental continuum, they disturb the peace of the mind. We don't feel at peace. So anger is very easy to see that now. In one moment when you're angry, in that moment you cannot be happy, right? You're not happy in that moment. The mind is always agitated and disturbed, and you feel unhappy, um, which is a little different from attachment. Attachment, which we spoke about last week. One reason attachment is much more difficult to reduce and get rid of is because when attachment arises in the mind, there's a disturbance, but there's also a lot of pleasant feelings that go along. Can be pleasant feeling that go along with it. So it's more difficult to reduce. Whereas anger is more easy. It's much more disturbing attitude. They say anger. I think I mentioned last week. Anger is like getting anger out of the mind is like washing mud out of clothes. It doesn't stick to the mind very much. It's quite kind of gross. And so, if you have mud on your clothes, you just put some water on it, rinse it, and it goes away. Whereas if you spilled like, strawberry jam on your clothes or something, it's going to be a lot harder to get out. You have to put soap and scrub it again and again and again to get it out, or oil more, something oily. So attachment is more like oil and cloth. It's very difficult to get out, to reduce in the mind. Whereas anger is more like mud, because it's so gross and it's so disturbing. It's unpleasant to have. So it's easy to identify as something that we don't want. Um, and then it's yeah, and therefore it's easier to generate antidotes to get rid of it, because we naturally don't want it. Whereas attachment, even when we generate the antidotes, part of our mind, we still kind of don't want to get rid of it. No, we kind of want to have it because there's a lot of pleasant sensations go along with it. Um, yeah, maybe just I mention a couple of drawbacks of anger before we try to define it, and then look at some in our own experience. Um, yeah, just from a scientific point of view, there are studies, quite a few studies, I believe, that show that the more anger a person has, the more frequently they get angry, and when they do get angry, the more intense the anger is. Then it correlates with having a shorter lifespan. It shortens the life because there's a strong correlation with anger and heart disease, right? You can feel like when you get really angry, you get really tight in the chest, and the adrenaline rushes, your blood pressure increases. There's a correlation with anger and high blood pressure, and high blood pressure is related to many other illnesses. You know? um, so um, yeah, so anger is related to high blood pressure, heart failure, and having shorter life in general, and also depression and loneliness, right? Which again is common sense, right? Because um, if we get angry at the if we get angry, usually we're going to get angry at the people who are around us, you know, the people we live with, our partners, people in our family, our friends, and then it makes well, it destroys those relationships. No? Just I mean, there's different ways to think about anger. One is, I mean, the one I'm kind of alluding to mainly is when to think about anger in terms of when we get angry at other people. But another very helpful way to think about anger and to help understand our own anger is to think about when other people get angry at us. No, other people's anger, and when we're the object of anger. So that thinking about that way, you can easily see how it destroys relationships. Because if our parents, one of our parents has an anger problem, get angry at us again and again, or a sibling or a friend, then you just don't. If someone's getting angry at you, even you had a good relationship for a long time, years, and then in one moment they get angry at you in a way that you feel is completely unjustified, or you don't understand why they got angry about that, why they reacted like that, then it really destroys trust. You don't. One, it's just not pleasant to be around, and if you didn't really understand why they got angry at you, then you're not sure in the future, like when they're going to get angry again. So you don't really want to be around the person, and even when you're around them, you feel like you can't really open up or relax because you're not sure what might provoke their anger at you. Um, so it really, and then I mean the foundation for any close relationship with another person is trust, and trust means largely trust that you know they trust you not to harm them, and you trust them not to harm you, right? You have to have that trust that we're not going to harm each other. If there's fear, that you're going to harm, that someone else is afraid you're going to harm them, or you're afraid someone else is going to harm you, then the communication is only kind of skin deep. No, they say, I believe that it's interesting to look at different customs we have, but I read somewhere some time ago, one custom, like the custom we have of shaking hands in the West, comes from the Middle Ages, when people were afraid when they meet someone, that time, like in a forest or on a road all alone, that the person might be a robber, you know, might be a highway robber that's going to stab them. So, or might have a knife, or there might be part of some kind of intrigue, to kill someone. And that time, everyone carries a knife, right? So then you shake someone's hand to show that you don't have a weapon in your hand. That's part of the, that's how the custom came about. Shake hands to show you don't have a weapon. Oh, I know where I read about some of these things in this book by Steven Pinker called, he's this famous psychologist and linguist in Harvard. He's written these two books, Enlightenment Now and Better Angels of Our Natures. So anyway, he was, I mean, his big kind of thing is that actually, although we, in many ways, we say the world's getting worse and worse and worse. If we actually look back like the Middle Ages or a long time ago, most people's quality of life is infinitely better. And that's kind of one example, is that in the past, so many people would worry about, getting killed from day to day. Um, yeah. Also, the development of butter knives um, came about. No, in the past, people used to have a knife. I mean, I lived with Tibetans the last 20 years, and most of them are like, well, farmers or shepherds. They raise yaks and cows and kind of a mix. Zo is a mix of yak and cow or sheep. But many of them, especially the nomads, actually, they're called. No, yeah, it's kind of the Chinese have sort of eliminated that lifestyle now, but it used to be a big part of Tibetan culture is especially in the summertime, you take your herds of animals and go to pasture areas and live in tent, live a nomadic lifestyle for at least part of the year. Um, but they eat a lot of meat, and so they carry their own knife usually to cut their meat. But again, Steven Pinker was saying in the Middle Ages, that's why butter knives were developed, because so many people got murdered at the dinner table. Because people would have their own knife, with a sharp point at the dinner table, and then they're talking and drinking, and then they get in an argument, and then get in a knife fight and kill each other. So people develop butter knives, so that, or like table knives, that are not pointed, right? That's the reason. So yeah. So again, a drawback of anger. No, you. Well, I mean, also, I used to go lead meditation sessions and teach Dharma a bit in a prison in Bangalore, in the central prison in Bangalore, South India, and all the inmates would tell me like the reason they're there is because of anger. You know, they're generally nice people, like good people, but they've been, committed a crime, and a lot for murder, because in a moment of anger, they hurt someone, or killed someone, or otherwise hurt someone, or burned something or stole something that they wouldn't have done if they hadn't been under the control of anger in that moment. Um, so even we don't do things that are criminal, um, but oftentimes we can see in our own experience, we get really angry at someone, and then we kind of lose our head and say things that are really hurtful, as hurtful as we can think of in that moment, that we wouldn't say if we were more calm and deliberate and thinking about, especially like our own long-term aims, long-term relationship with the person, is thinking in a more kind of civil way. So yeah, so anger causes a lot of destruction in our relationships with others, and our the health of our having good social support network with friends and family, having good friendships, good communication, being able to share time, enjoy time spent with other people, have when we have something troubling our mind, having a friend to talk to, being a resource for others to come and in our family or friends to come talk to about things we're facing. That's one of the biggest. Does that kind of the richness of our social network with family and friends is the strongest indicator of having a happy life and long life. It's stronger than well, conversely, loneliness. People are lonely, don't have a connection with others. That's a stronger indicator of ill health, of sickness, and shortening your lifespan than alcohol or tobacco use. That was quite interesting. I came across that research recently. So yeah, loneliness is it takes a huge. I mean, it makes us unhappy and takes a huge toll on our physical health as well. Generally, we can see in our own experience how when we're unhappy physically, we don't feel well. We don't have energy. We feel weak. We don't feel like, exercising. We don't feel like eating. Um, and the body just feels kind of heavy and kind of stuck. Whereas when we feel very happy, um, then the body feels lighter. We have more energy. We feel like moving, exercising. We enjoy like, food and, things we see here. Um, yeah, and we just feel healthy, right? So anger, yeah, you can look at, anger takes a heavy toll on our body, and also on our relationship and our sense of interconnectedness with others. Um, so those are some of the drawbacks. Not to mention, yeah, from a Buddhist point of view, because in Buddhism we're always thinking about trying to, keep things in the perspective of we have countless past lives and we have future lives, and we have the potential for full enlightenment. And the thing that mainly determines, like through this kind of continuity of lives, but especially looking at this life and future lives, the thing that determines whether we have happiness or whether we have misery and dissatisfaction is largely our karma, what kind of karma we create. So when we do things with a virtuous mind, a positive intention, that's why we spend time on a motivation at the beginning of a session like this. Then whatever we do that's compelled by that virtuous aspiration, it becomes a cause of happiness and well-being. It's something virtuous that we do with a positive, intention. But anything we do with the opposite, with a negative intention, the intention to harm, create harm, to harm others, harm ourselves, that all becomes non-virtuous karma, and the cause of suffering in the future. So anger is one of the strongest negative minds, right? Non-virtuous mind, because it is an intention to harm. So when we get angry, uh, of course, we create very powerful causes for our own future suffering. But also the mind of anger, it destroys the seeds of virtue that we've created in the past. So virtuous things, merit that we've accumulated in the past, which is a cause for our future suffering. In a moment of anger, because anger is such a powerful negative mind, it can destroy many causes of happiness that we've created in the past for ourselves. Similarly to the way, even we've had a very good friendship with a person, a good relationship for a person over, several years. In one moment of anger and a very heated argument, it can totally destroy that, such that, they never want to see us again, and we never want to see them again, and whatever. So it's similar kind of power. Okay, so that's some of the drawbacks. So now let's look at more like, well, what is anger? What are we talking about? It's important to define it. Because by defining it, then we kind of start to get more control over it by being able to see clearly what it is. So the purpose of defining it is also to help us, when it begins to arise in our mind, to be able to notice more quickly, and then be able to try to do something to prevent it from getting out of control, rather reduce it. So, well, what do you, were some of you here last week? Some of you were, yeah. So I'll take a little test. So, because some of the way we define anger is similar to the way we define attachment, right? So with attachment, we observe an object, right? So, so we ourselves can be the object of attachment or anger, or another person, or another inanimate phenomena. But with attachment, when we observe the object, how does attachment, what aspects of the object does attachment focus on? Remember? Huh? Yeah, the positives. So what do you think anger focuses on? The opposite, the negatives, right? So where attachment, any object has both positive and negative sides, just by nature, right? But attachment focuses on its object and sees exclusively the positive, the attractive, or the pleasant aspects of the object. Anger is the opposite. When the anger focuses on, if it's ourself and we're angry at ourselves, we're just looking at something negative about ourselves. If we're angry at someone else, we focus on someone else, and we exclusively see the negative, something negative about them. At the cost of seeing anything in that mind, it can't see anything positive about the person. An objective mind could look at and see, oh, well, they have this fault, but they also have this quality, right? But the mind of anger can't do that. That's why any afflictive emotion kind of blinds us to seeing things objectively, right? So the mind of anger looks at another person and focuses exclusively on that negative aspect, right? So it's not to say that that's just an illusion, that they don't, that nobody does anything wrong. It's all just in our imagination. That's not the case. Like people do bad things. I mean, there are negative, and people have negative aspects of their, their behavior, their speech, and just like we do, right? Um, but so here again, we could think, well, when other people are angry at me, is it true that they're just focusing on something negative about me? Yeah, it is. You can see. So we'll check. So anger, it focuses on an object. It focuses exclusively on a negative aspect of that object and then exaggerates it, right? Just like attachment focuses exclusively on a positive aspect and then exaggerates that. Be like, oh, this person's, angel. This is the best food in the world. We create this whole story about how great, attachment creates a story about how great something is and how much it's going to satisfy me, please me. Anger does the opposite, focuses exclusively on a negative aspect, exaggerates that, and it creates a story about how terrible that is, such that that negative person or thing or that we're focusing on, it fills up our world. No, it fills up all this space, and it really disturbs the mind. No, such that we feel threatened by that, and we feel like we have to do something to get rid of that. Right? So we focus on a negative aspect, exaggerate that negative aspect, and then feel like, and then because we feel threatened by that, we feel like we have to do something to get rid of it, which means to harm it or destroy it. No. So anger is not only like seeing something that you dislike and being repelled by it, but it's more intense wish to harm that. Just like, again, attachment is the opposite. Focus exclusively on a positive aspect, exaggerate that, and then crave to possess it, right? Want to possess. It's because of craving, like wanting to have something. Whereas anger is wanting to get rid of something, push it away. It's an aversion. But, and maybe I'll just mention one more quality about both anger and attachment, which I forgot to mention last week in regard to attachment. It's very important. Because in both cases, it's difficult. One of the most difficult things looking at attachment or anger is how to, with attachment, how to differentiate, which we spoke about a bit last week, but this one thing I'm going to point out, I think helps a lot. How to differentiate just like afflictive attachment from just ordinary enjoyment, right? Ordinary being attracted, liking something, being attracted to something, enjoying something. And then in the case of anger, what's the difference between anger, which is afflictive, to just like not liking something or not liking someone or thinking that, or kind of outrage in a way, seeing something that someone or some group is doing and being outraged by that, seeing that that's wrong and I have to stand up to do something about that, right? Which is okay, right? So how do you distinguish the two? One thing that helps hugely is that with anger and attachment, the concern is always selfish, right? It always comes back to me, what oneself as an individual wants. So in the case of attachment, we see something, we're attracted to it, and it's like, I want that. And especially with regard to another person, because oftentimes it always happens in love, right? Your attachment is a big part of, falling in love with someone or being obsessed with someone. But in the case of attachment, like the love, real pure love is really wishing for especially pure love for another person is wishing for their welfare, wishing for their happiness without regard to what oneself wants, right? Like the selfless love of a parent for their child should be really just caring about the child and whatever is for their welfare without strings attached, without all these expectations of need for me. So real love in a relationship is really wishing for the welfare of another person and their happiness without something. Whereas attachment is the opposite. Attachment is, I want to be with you, or I want to be with this person because it'll please me. Ultimately, it's a selfish wish, that I want to get something. So it's not really concerned about the other person. It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? It's not really concerned about the other person. Actually, the concern is about oneself, what I want. So that's a huge, that you can, you play with that in your own meditation. But see, it's helpful to compare like a mind of attachment from a mind of love and see, is that really the dividing thing, whether it's selfish interest or not. With anger, again, so this one we'll meditate on together. So anger, when you're angry at someone, it's always um, the you always have your own selfish interest at is the root thing, right? So so again, focus on the negative aspect, exaggerate that, wish to harm because you want, you know, to be rid of that. You want to get rid of the person. You want, it's like you feel threatened. Or oneself feels threatened or doesn't like that, and that's the reason. So there's no part of the mind thinking about the welfare of the other person, right? Whereas contrast that with like kind of outrage or um, I don't know, it's another can be wrathfulness, but wrathfulness is more like what you would do. Um, well, maybe outrage is a good enough term. But think about if you see, I mean, a classic example is a very good example is like in the case of a teacher or let's say a teacher, usually or a parent. But if there's a teacher working with a child or a group of people, and one of them is behaving in such a way that it's really disruptive to the classroom again and again, and try to discipline the child or speak to them first, explain, no, please don't behave that way. It's really disruptive to the others, but they don't listen again and again. Then you have to use some, kind of more forceful, do something, show angry face or, um, yeah, maybe threaten with some punishment or something to try to if the kind of gentle, kind means don't work, then you need to try something else to get the point across. But in that case, the concern is really it's not to harm, it's for the to benefit the child, no? To benefit the person. Um, so it shouldn't be if it but there's a huge danger because it's difficult to control our mind when we get upset or agitated, irritated about by something. Um, but you can see with anger if the concern is selfish, like I don't want them doing this to me, I don't want them like disrupting my classroom in that way, then it's selfish, no? And then the way the relating is not really for the welfare of the other person, the child. Whereas if the mind instead can be really compassionate, oh, the other children in the class, they need to be able to study, they need to be able to focus. This child is not able to control yourself, probably because they themselves are agitated by something, suffering in their mind, need some special attention, um, and so you need to make space for them to receive the special attention. So, um, and help them deal with their own kind of disturbing attitudes that are arising in their mind. So then if you can see that someone else's behavior is destructive or disruptive and have to address that. But if the concern is really about them, for their welfare, that's not anger, right? Even though externally it can take similar kind of expression. So big dividing line between anger and sort of um, uh, yeah, outrage or um, something is whether the concern is primarily selfish, or it's also includes, you know, not only one's own what oneself needs, but what's beneficial for others. Okay, so let's meditate a little bit, looking at um, our own experience of anger, um, and we can discuss a little bit, and to try to we'll try to, like I was saying earlier, we'll try to remember a time we've been angry. We'll start with that. So when you do that, first of all, don't think of the time when you were like the most angry you've ever been, because there's a danger you just slip into that again. There's all kinds of thoughts and feelings and memories that go with that. And you don't want to be overwhelmed by those, because then you won't be able to think about objectively, right? So pick a kind of instance of anger that's either mild or middling. It has to be strong enough that you can actually feel like what it was like to be in that moment, right? But it also has to leave enough space in your mind that you have a part of your mind, say 30, 40%, you can look at in an objective way and see like, well, you know, well, then what we'll do is compare our own experience of anger with this definition of anger I've been explaining and see if does it match or not, or what are some other things I notice, or where does it seem to not fit, or to try to understand more about like what our anger is. And then we'll think about being the object of someone else's anger. Okay? So just focus your attention within for a moment. You can go back to your breath or your mind, generate a kind of neutral state of mind. So then, yeah, remember a time you got angry at someone, got irritated or angry with someone. And try to put yourself in that position again. Try to sort of relive that experience from, briefly um, from the time, just prior to that when you weren't irritated, and then kind of what happened, what was said, um, and try to remember vividly that, that experience of becoming angry in that moment. Try to remember how that felt, what sort of thoughts arose, what sort of, in your body, how it felt, what sort of things you might have said. So now try to, with a corner of your mind, try to maintain that awareness of that anger. And then with another part of your mind, we'll try to look at it and look at the some of the characteristics I've been describing. So first of all, when the anger arose, did it disturb the peace of the mind, the peace of your mind? Right? So did it cause the mind to be agitated, disturbed, and also your body to feel, uncomfortable, agitated? And then looking more at the mind of anger. So is it true that it focused on something negative about, the person you're angry at, that you're angry at? Did it focus exclusively on something, unpleasant, disturbing, a negative you saw as bad? Something that you saw as bad about them? And then did it exaggerate? Well, first of all, something negative and become blind to anything positive about the person. Or whether those two things focused exclusively on something negative, at the cost of seeing and being able to see anything positive in that moment. And then did the anger exaggerate the negative aspects of the person? So type of exaggeration is thinking that that's all there is about them. It's just this negative thing that I see, which is related to what we're just looking at. But another type of exaggeration is thinking, that something that's, slightly bad is just terrible. It's kind of like the end of the world. That is a completely, insurmountable kind of negative thing that the only solution is to destroy the person. So it's that type of exaggeration can cause us to feel extremely threatened. So in your own experience of anger, do you see not only focusing exclusively on the negative aspect, but also exaggerating that, the size of it, the intensity of it, the kind of badness of it, and thereby the impossibility of doing anything constructive in relation to that person to reduce that. Mm. And then the next feature to check is then that mind of anger, did it want to harm? Right? Because I was saying that's another part of the definition of anger. It's the mind that focuses exclusively on a negative aspect, exaggerates that, and then in response wants to harm that person. Or the object can be an inanimate object, can be oneself as well. So is there some degree of that? The mind wishing to harm, destroy, push away, to be completely, to cause to cease to exist or to be completely separated from the object of one's anger. And then a final thing to check is this um, this aspect of selfish concern. So is it true that one's anger, this moment of anger, one's concern is exclusively about for oneself, what oneself wants or desires, and is not taking into consideration the welfare of, of others in general, and especially of the person who's the object of one's anger, like what they need or what they want, what's good for them is not the concern at all, not something the mind of anger sees or considers. But the concern is exclusively like what I want. Is that true or not about that in your experience? Mm. So now let's think about um, being the object of someone else's anger, right? So we'll totally change, yeah, what we're thinking about. So again, we'll go through the definition of anger briefly. But now think about, so yeah, so sort of let go of this time when you were angry, and rather think about when you were an object of someone else's anger. So someone else was angry at you. So try to think about anger from that perspective. So again, try to vividly bring to mind the situation. Remember a little bit the history of the how that event arose, and then what it felt like in that moment specifically when you feel clearly this person's angry at me, and how that felt. Mm. So then check briefly through these different characteristics of anger. So I'll just mention them all at once, and you can check. So did it feel like they're focusing exclusively on something negative about you in that moment, at that time, not seeing anything positive and exaggerating sort of the negativity, that negative aspect, and then wishing to harm? Did it feel like they wanted to harm you in some way? Not necessarily physically, like killing you or something, but even just like by kind of cutting with an insult or a slight. And did it feel like their concern is really for themselves, not for you or anyone else, but primarily in that moment, their concern was, you know, selfish. And then maybe finally, just before we stop, just to check, how did you feel disturbed when you're the object of another person's anger? Did it disturb your mind in a similar way to when you become angry at someone else? Mm. Okay, so we can stop there for that little meditation. Um, Yeah, I'm interested to hear what your experience. Did you, because this is one thing's very helpful about doing this kind of exercise is that, well, in some ways you can see that the description, like this Buddhist description of anger, in some ways it fits our experience, but in some ways we'll find it doesn't fit, and that leads to other questions about, well, what about this situation? What about that situation? And then that helps to kind of learn more. So it's important to have kind of curiosity. But well, one, I guess, do you have any questions? Kind of any questions like that come up? Or two, if you have any comments, your own experience about, well, this part seemed to fit very clearly, but this part maybe not so much. Yes. Mm. Mm. You mean to other people or to the person who did something? To other people, that person that did something wrong is not trustworthy. Uh, but which, but the anger is directed towards the person, right? The first person did something, right? Uh, yeah, but if that's true, then that's true, right? I mean, that's not that that could be true. I mean, yeah. Well, that's the danger. If you think of that in terms of anger, it distorts that whole reality. But that's why it's so important to have, well, compassion is good. I mean, always, usually when someone's done something to harm us, one way to react is like, is more of a defensive posture. Like, I mean, there can be a wholesome defensive posture, but there can also be one react is just, well, the mind of anger, focusing exclusively on what's negative and wanting to harm them as a way of resolving the problem, which is not a long-term resolution. That's why anger is so irrational. It doesn't work. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that wanting to tell other people, yeah, that's motivated by anger because you want to harm that person, so you want to disparage that person, slander the person, and destroy their connection. Actually, that is going to harm them. I mean, that's a huge harm to them. But that doesn't help. See, the thing is, like, if the someone's harmed us, and so we, it's okay to want them to stop harming us. That's logical. That's healthy, right? But then the way we do that, if they're harming us, why are they harming us? Probably because in their mind they're very disturbed. That's why they're just like when we harm other people, we're not acting out of our best, out of our best qualities. No, we're acting because we're disturbed and we're desperate and we don't know what else to do. And so this is like the last resort, like an animal, trapped in a corner. That's when they attack. Ordinarily, if they're just, walking around the forest and you see them, they'll just keep their space and you keep your space and everything's okay. It's when they feel threatened and pushed into a corner and they're desperate, they don't know what else to do, then they attack, right? So we're like that. When we're desperate, we don't know what else to do, then our worst comes out and then we harm other people. So when other people harming us, we have to remember, well, that's what's going on. Like they're not acting at their best, they're not acting rationally, they're harming us. So if we go then to harm them, it's like forcing them more into a corner, making it more likely for them to harm us. So the healthy thing is do is we'll find ways to help them find, a solution to what's going on in their mind.
Can I ask something?
Yes, I think in the Zoom room. Yes.
Yeah, I'm in the Zoom room.
Okay, please.
How do you go about? I had a situation that's so right on with what you're saying,
Uh-huh.
and but it entails a daughter mother, right?
Oh, yes.
Which are, very, very deep relationships. My
Yes.
daughter was angry at me
Mm,
and um, angry and rage, and we haven't spoken. There's a since it's been
mm.
about 2 weeks. So how do you approach? How do you try to heal something when somebody that you love deeply is angry at you? besides working on yourself, how do you heal a relationship like that when that trust has been broken? And I mean, I am hurt.
Of
Uh-huh.
course. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, of course. If you've, I mean, especially that's one of the most hurtful things is and most difficult is when we spend so much time and energy trying to benefit someone as a parent, raising your daughter from when she's very young and spending, so much selfless, care and love and attention. Um, and then to have that met with kind of resentment and anger towards you, of course, that'd be very painful. But I think, I mean, there's easy answer is just try to be kind, no? To try to uh, in spite of, whatever whatever way she treats you, whatever, someone else, whatever the way she, says or does to you, just try to be because of knowing the kind of person that you want to be yourself, then despite whatever, in this case, your daughter does, try to be kind and show that you want what's best for her. And also try to understand that the reason she's mistreating you, just like whenever anyone mistreats us, is not because like deep down in their mind they really want to harm us, but because there's something disturbing their own mind. So in the case of your daughter, there's something, that's causing a lot of pain in her mind, and she's probably connecting it to with something, that happened in your past relationship and making that blaming it on that, which is, you, not, I mean, we can never put all the blame on another person. That's not
Mhm.
fair. So I have to also have compassion, right? For recognizing the person who's angry at us, actually they're suffering a lot, just as when we're angry at another person, we're miserable in that moment.
Mhm.
um, and that's why, I mean, I think that's why in the end of the meditation we just did, I asked you to reflect on, when someone else is angry at you, does it disturb your mind or not? It just occurred to me, I think it's very similar, no? When we're
Yeah.
angry at another person, the degree to which our mind is disturbed actually is very similar to when someone else is angry at us.
Mhm.
Even we're not angry, we're the object of someone's anger, but it's almost like, because naturally as human beings, we're social creatures, so we have a natural ability to at a very subtle level, resonate with what other people are feeling, whether it's good or whether it's bad. So I think when other people are angry at us, even it's like we're not upset about anything particular, but their mind is disturbed, right, by anger, and we can feel that, and that disturbs our mind. And also, I mean, it can be fearful, right? We might be afraid that when someone's angry at us, what they're going to say or do. Partly there's that, but I think partly there's also our mind resonates with the disturbance in their mind. So when your daughter's angry at you and resentful and maybe, if she doesn't speak to you, maybe speak to other people in the family about you in a negative way, then again and again, compassion helps a lot. Again and again, remember, she's suffering a lot,
Mhm.
by being angry, and focus on that again and again, and wish for her to be free from suffering. Um, yeah. And then see where that takes you.
Mhm. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah. Yes. And then first you, and then you. No, no. First you with the hat. Yes. Very much. Yes. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. I think again. I mean, yeah. The forgiveness is very close to compassion. That you recognizing that they're they're acting under under the power of their own disturbing minds. You I mean, so often, like for example, so often people who abuse their own children, they were abused as children. Like if you were abused as a child, you're much more likely to abuse someone else. If one of your parents was disloyal, I think, or not, was it disloyal, or cheating on the others, then you're probably more likely to do that the same. Because as children, we tend to replicate the behavior of our parents from very young age. So yeah, I mean, almost anytime someone's harming another person, it's because they themselves have been harmed in some way, and they don't know how to deal with that in a healthy way, right? Um, and so, but that doesn't mean that we should excuse that anyway, just because someone's been harmed, then whatever they do is okay. But it means when we consider what they've done, we should also taking their own history and their own mental state into consideration, be more compassionate, basically, but that also helps to be more skillful in dealing with helping them, right? I mean, that's what's like look at our incarceration system in the U.S. and the penal system. It's so harmful to people because there's not really space in the legal system the way it's set up to consider people's mental health. People who commit crimes, put in prison, but that just worsens their whole mental health and makes it more likely for them to commit crimes in the long term, often. So, but yeah, I mean, but it's similar to. I was thinking, I used to teach in a classroom in the past, when I was giving that example of teachers and dealing with students. I know, like I remember when I was in Taiwan teaching English in a private school. Then I remember this one boy. I don't remember his name now, but oh man, he was so difficult. And he would just he would want so much attention, and he's very intelligent, but very like kind of one of those really sassy, smart aleck kids that like knows the answer to every question and tries to make the teacher just look like a fool in front of all the other students, which would really trigger you as a teacher, because part of your maintaining kind of order in the classroom was having some sort of authority and some sort of respect from the students. And then he knows that, and he's totally try to undermine it. But really, that child, I know what he needed was just a loving affection. He didn't get much affection or attention or love from his parents. His parents were very wealthy, very busy people, like always out working and leaving him all alone. What he really needed was just attention. So, but when you're trying to teach 30 kids, you can't give all your attention to just one. The others are going to go amok like in no time. So it's really, you're caught between a rock and a hard place. Usually what would happen with that child, because the owner of the private school knew, so when she could see like I was really getting fed up, then she would tell me, oh, just come tell me and I'll take him and just be with him privately, which is what he needed, right? So, but yeah, when someone's hurt you intentionally, um yeah, I mean, it's just not easy to deal with, like in any way, especially over a long term in a very deep way. But we have to try, as best we can, for our own peace of mind, to have our own kind of life that eventually can be free from the sort of wounds of that experience, right? And part of that is forgiving the person, but that doesn't mean like um, making excuses for what they did, but it can help just to think, well, why did they do those things? It's out of their ignorance, their own confusion, their distorted state of mind, their own past history in this life, maybe their karma from previous lives, if you want to explore that whole part of the story. um, but whatever they did to me, like, we also, it's helpful to recognize like who we are as a person is up to us. No, it's not up to anyone else, right? So we create. It's not like as a person we're like our identity, our character, our persona is something fixed. For one hand, it's not like it was just kind of written in stone at the time we're born and that's the way it is till we die. It's changing all the time. We're impermanent. Our minds are changing all the time. Our bodies are changing all the time. Through life, we change. um, and then mainly the most important significance of aspects about what we are is really our own perception of ourselves, the story that we create about who we are. So yes, someone might do something very harmful to us, but how much that's going to remain a part of us in the future, once we're not, that person's not in our life, that's not happening to us anymore, is partly up to us. Of course, partly we can't just, you know, totally erase the past, like it's there. But we can try to reduce how much it is part of me by remembering that who I am, who I want to be is really up to me. It's not up to anyone else to decide that. No. Um, so I think it's important to not let other people's like negative trip about us that control our identity about who we are. No? And that's why it's so important, like when there's people who are really harming us, to get away from them, no? To not stay in like a in the same house, in the same place, to really make space for us to be safe and for us to be surrounded by positive influences, people who support us and love us and care about us. um, yeah, but that's where the families again is the most difficult. Sometimes, especially if you're in, a spouse or children and parents living together. I see this in India when I was in India a lot because extended family live together, and then oftentimes it's not realistic that someone who's really treating you badly, you can just live somewhere else. Like you have to be in the same house. That's really difficult circumstance. Um, yeah. Oh yes, yeah. Hmm. Mm. Yes. Yeah. Hmm. Mm. Mm. Yeah. 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 Mm. Yeah. I think um I don't, do you have a more concrete kind of example, or then okay, I can just answer in a kind of what I understand. Yeah. I think mm, 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 right, right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Right, right. Yeah, yeah. Mm, right, right. Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. But don't you want to be the bigger person? I mean, why not? I think that you need to be the bigger person because you can, no? And if there no one can, then it's just going to be a bigger mess, no? Someone has to be the bigger person. Like, I mean, yeah. I think it's because in the long term, like, what do we want to be? Do we want to be the smaller person or want to be the bigger person? Actually, we don't have time for more questions. I just want to. We're about out of time. Um, but I wanted to point out, so because we're not going to have time to meditate together on antidotes to anger, but the way the way I'll mention some antidotes now, but they're each related to. That's why it's so helpful to look at it to define anger first, and then once you define it well, and in relation to each of the characteristics of what anger is, you can see a way to undercut it, right? Um, so, but just before that, another reason of meditating on anger like this to analyze closely exactly what it is so that we can very clearly identify it in our own experience. So when you start with a kind of middling kind of experience of anger like we did, then I mean the bigger ones are easy to identify, right? But what one big purpose of this is to see how we focus exclusively on a negative aspect, exaggerate that, react by wanting to harm. It arises from interest that's primarily self-centered. And then also to see how it affects my body. When I become angry, my muscles start to clench, my adrenaline races, I get a clenching in my chest. I start to like think this way. Then by identifying those characteristics, especially the physical ones, then when we start to get irritated and we start to go in that path of anger, we can more quickly identify. And then if we apply antidotes while it's small, it's easy to change course. Once it's already very strong and big, then it's very difficult to do anything different, except just walk away, just hold your tongue and walk away. Um, but then antidotes. So when you see, you're talking with someone and you see they're irritating you, already that's a warning flag. You can see I'm getting irritated. Then you see the mind just thinking about what they're saying and just thinking how that's totally wrong. That's totally bad. Now you see the mind focusing exclusively on a negative. Then in that moment, you can think, well, what's something positive? Is there anything, if you can remember one positive thing about the person, it's like lemon and oil. No, it totally undercuts the mind of anger and opens the mind up to be like, okay, well, maybe this negative part I don't like, I can work with in the context of this broader understanding of the person, right? So you have to find positive things to connect with the person about, to problem solve about the negative thing that's coming up, right? So that's one antidote. When you start become angry, try to think, is there anything positive I can remember or say about the person? And then that's related to the next, because we exaggerate the negative. Then is that really all there is to the person? Again, if you can think of something positive about the person or the scenario, that can help to reduce anger. And then the mind wanting to harm them. So here, yeah, thinking about if you could remember how basically it's wrong to harm anyone because you don't want to be harmed, right? How we don't want to be harmed ourselves. So if you can remember, this mind wanting to harm others is just wrong. It's not something I should do. And if you really feel like you're something's going to slip out that's going to be harmful, then it's like Shanti Deva says, remain like a block of wood. Just don't say anything. You can, or yeah, just maybe say, well, can we talk about this later? Like, I don't want to talk about it now. Um, but that's where also as an antidote to anger. Um, I mean, the direct antidote to anger is practicing patience, like being able. Patience means there's different kinds of patience, but one of the main is just being able to bear harm with grace, basically, without retaliating. Um, but another thing that can help with anger is um, to reflect again and again and again how oneself and other sentient beings are the same in that we basically want happiness and want to be free from suffering, right? So this is a fundamental kind of Buddhist meditation and contemplation to recognize that I myself, I want happiness, I want to be free from suffering. Other sentient beings, anyone who has a mind, they're also the same in that way. So as the mind of anger starts to arise, if you can remember that, oh, this person also basically they want to be free from suffering, they want to be happy. That can help, maintain this kind of humane connection with them, rather than um, sort of objectifying them as something negative and thereby something I feel justified like harming. Um, and then the mind of loving kindness. I mean, another main antidote to anger is the mind of loving kindness, wishing for the well-being of others. So the more one meditates on loving kindness as a regular practice, you'll see the less prone you are to become angry. The instances with which you become angry are less frequent. The intensity is reduced. And then when you do become angry, you're able to recover from that and recover a more healthy state of mind more quickly over time. So if you practice antidotes to anger, you should see those things. The frequency is reduced, the intensity is reduced, the recovery time is shorter. Yeah. Okay, that's all we have time for this morning. So anyway, if you're interested, I encourage you to follow up. There's many good resources, books by His Holiness Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and others. So let's dedicate now, thinking whatever merit or positive energy we've created in this session, and rejoice. So think by the force of this, then may the anger in our own mind be reduced and gradually completely eliminated without a trace. And may our own minds become filled with loving kindness, compassion, and genuine concern for others, irrespective of how they act or how they treat us. And then by this force of this positive energy also, may all sentient beings, all beings in the world be completely free of anger. So especially those who are engaged in war, violent conflict, like in Israel and Gaza, in Ukraine, in Sudan, in Yemen, and other places in the world. And where there's hatred between people of different religious groups, different ethnic groups. May their minds be completely pacified, be free from the fire of anger, and be filled with loving concern for one another and universal compassion, universal love for others. And then may all the sick be free, those who have sickness in body and mind be healed. Those who have died recently, may they take a precious human rebirth, the rebirth on a pure land. Those who are hungry or thirsty, may they have food, clothing, shelter. And then bring to mind any other prayers you'd like to make for any family, friends, or causes. May all those prayers be answered in accordance with your wishes, and be fulfilled in accordance with your wishes. So in short, may all sentient beings be free from every form of harm and have every form of well-being and happiness up to full enlightenment. And may this Dharma Center, Land of Medicine Buddha, be able to have all the supportive conditions in terms of staff and finances and other conditions to be able to continue offering more and more programs like this far into the future. Okay, thank you all. Oh, I wanted to announce actually, I'm starting especially because of this conflict in Israel, we'll do sutra reading tonight, starting tonight at 8 o'clock, 8 to 8:45 every night this week. And then Saturday we'll do at the beach at Aptos. Well, the name of the beach, the bottom of the stairs in Aptos. It'll be on Zoom and also here in person, 8 to 8:45 tonight. So, take care. 6 to 7. Yeah, 6 to 7. Thank you. Sure, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, it's on the Facebook. It'll be streamed on the Facebook page.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mhm.